Go to skeptic.com/magazine to get your subscription, and also check out back issues because we have a bunch of them in print going all the way back to 1992 with Isaac Asimov on the cover. And hey, guess what? We got merch. Check this out. We got a cool Skeptic t-shirt. Look at that. That's the new design. Here we go.
Wow.
And we got a cap. We got an official Skeptic cap. There it is. How's that? Looking pretty black and gnarly, men in black. Then we have a sort of an old school vintage. This was when Frank Sulloway spoke for us and about his book about Darwin as a rebel. So it's a rebel with a cause. There it is.
I love it.
Okay, enough of the salesmanship here. Let's get started. All right, my guest today, returning champion, Scott Barry Kaufman. He's a cognitive psychologist who's among the top 1% most cited scientists in the world for his groundbreaking research on intelligence, creativity, and human potential. He's the host of the Psychology podcast, which has received more than 30 million downloads and is frequently ranked as the #1 psychology podcast in the world. People are always asking me, do you know this guy? Can you get me on there? Dr. Kaufman's writings have appeared in The Atlantic, Scientific American, Psychology Today, and Harvard Business Review. And is the author of 10 previous books, including Transcend. I think he was on for that. That's what he was on the last time for. Wired to Create, and Ungifted. That's about my potential, I think. Anyway, his new book, here it is, Rise Above, Overcome a Victim Mindset.
There it is.
Empower yourself and realize your full potential. Scott, nice to see you. How you doing?
Oh, it's so good to see you again, Michael. I've really been looking forward to this call.
Yeah, so wow, another new book. This is great. But for those who missed the first episode, give us a little bit of background. What's your story? How did you get into psychology and academia and then writing books? And I guess you're off to Columbia now pretty soon, right?
Yes. Pray for me.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. I mean, the moment you mentioned on Twitter that you got a job at Columbia, like the next day, that whole crazy story breaks.
Yes. Hello, welcome. It's not. I mean, I've been off and on there since 2018. So.
Oh, I see.
But this is my full time. So how does one answer that question? So my interest in human potential and human psychology really goes all the way back to my childhood because I was in special ed as a kid for a learning disability that I had. It was hard for me to process things, so people thought I was ungifted, and I wasn't really even college bound. And it really took this moment in 9th grade when a special ed teacher took me aside who had never seen me before. This was the start of high school, and she said, what are you still doing here? And I thought in my head, what am I still doing here? And I became the first person in my school history and maybe even the history of special ed where the kid himself took himself out. He said he broke out himself or herself. And as I was like, I'm out. And I wanted to see what I was capable of. And, so a lot of the roots of that and what happened to me then really, I feel like just created this destiny for me for this book, this current book that has come out, because I've always had this particular way of thinking where I didn't want to be trapped into low expectations. I wanted to rise above.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So how did they determine back then that you were not gifted, that you belonged in this special ed program?
Well, they gave IQ tests. When I was about 7 years old, I was forced to take an IQ test. I could barely hear the experimenter because I had these auditory issues. And so they concluded that I wasn't that smart. But there was this moment in 9th grade where something like some light went on and I was like, I'm going to just prove everyone wrong. I'm going to get a PhD from Yale. I tried to think what would be like the craziest thing for a ungifted kid to do,
Oh, that's really funny. So you turned adversity, as it were, or low expectations into a form of motivation.
Correct.
But I mean, there's a lesson there, right? You hear these stories. There was somebody else's book I was reading about adversity in life, and it was the story of this poor black kid that was raised in this horrible environment. And I mean, it just went on for pages about how bad it is. It turns out it's LeBron James, right? The greatest player of all time. It's like, oh, okay, what's the point of this story? You don't want to put people through that. But so why is it that some people like yourself or LeBron James take those kind of conditions and turn them into a motivating factor?
Well, I talk in the book about the power of the underdog motivation. I have a whole chapter on that. And there is some recent research suggesting that failure is not necessarily a bad thing. Like having low expectations is not necessarily a bad thing. For a lot of people, it's very energizing and motivating because you want to like prove the person wrong, you know? Your question is, what is that individual differences variable? I know what you're asking. And I don't know exactly what it is, but we do know that the underdog motivation can be a very powerful motivating force. You definitely motivated me. I don't think it's sustainable and healthy in the long run, although Michael Jordan, kept inventing uh, enemies just
Right.
over and over and
Right.
over again, even when they weren't actually enemies. And in that context, that's good. But I think not necessarily in all contexts is it good to maintain that. You want your motivations to ultimately be mature, be not ego based, but growth oriented. All the good things. Good kinds of motivation, not power and money, but wanting to help and contribute. You know what everyone would say. But I do think for a strong period of my life, an underdog motivation was the thing that got me through the tough times. I don't know. I think a lot to myself, why did I break out of special ed? No one else did. Um, it's just, it's very easy to just trust the experts and to fall into this kind of passivity where you feel like, oh, well, people must know me better than I know myself. But I'm really here to try to empower people to not think that way.
Yeah, the realize your full potential of your subtitle. I mean, there's a whole movement of the human potential.
It
But
is.
yours is what I like about you is yours data driven. Most of this is more, I don't know, anecdotal or experiential, or
I'm
how do you
trying
think
to
about that?
spearhead a science of human potential movement. And originally, so I run the Center for Human Potential. Originally, the name of my center was the Center for the Science of Human Potential, but I just decided that was too much of. It's just pithier to say Center for Human Potential, but I think there is a growing movement of people interested in the science of this stuff in a not woo woo sort of way. Um, yeah, I really, like especially with my book Transcend, I tried to test a lot of Maslow's ideas and a lot of the humanistic, the people who were literally the human potential movement, the bedrock of the human potential movement in the '60s. Um, I wanted to scientifically test some of the ideas and see what was going on. Um, I I do try to keep a fair bit of skepticism as well.
Well, there's plenty need for that in that movement.
Yeah.
I mean, we followed the self-help movement over the decades, the Tony Robbins types, and they can be very effective, but how do you know? Right. Because it's just all anecdotes. I went to see Tony's thing. I took his weekend thing and, it changed my life. Okay.
Uh,
How many people did it and it didn't change their lives, or it motivated them for a couple of weeks and then they went back to, kind of life as usual.
well, that's
You know,
usually what happens is you get a quick burst of inspiration and then you return to your life. As they say, wherever you go, there you are.
is that what that expression means?
I think that's what it means. That's John Kabat-Zinn. Yeah, his
Oh,
expression.
all right. Did you ever see that Netflix documentary? Did we talk about this? The I'm Not Your Guru, that film about Tony Robbins?
I did see that documentary. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it should have been called I Am Your Guru because that's really what it was.
yeah, yeah.
But that's the problem. Like they have that scene where he's calling that woman up on the, in the spotlight from 1,000 people in the auditorium, and has her call her boyfriend and break up right there, on camera. So she dumps this poor guy, but there's no follow up. Like a month later, she's back with the guy. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. I don't.
So
Well,
okay,
I
so
like the way you think about this stuff. I've enjoyed your books. Not to turn the spotlight on you, but I don't think your ego will mind. You won't mind. But I really I like the way that you take and tackle really really heavy issues, heavy things. Like religion, God. Does God exist? It's like okay, that's an easy easy one to tackle, or conspiracy theories. Because I'm very interested in this kind of stuff too. I've actually had quite a few podcast episodes recently on my podcast trying to talk about the skepticism of the telepathy tapes, for instance,
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
ESP and all
yeah.
that. So I'm very interested in this kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I haven't written anything on that yet. I was just watching the Rogan podcast with that woman.
Mm.
It looks like it's just a recycled, facilitated communication. Is that what it looks like to you?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't have quite put it that way, but um, and in it, without more evidence, that is what it looks like right now when you actually look at the totality of the evidence,
Yeah.
and the real problems you have when you don't separate the mother and the child in any sort of separation sort of way. So they hold hands the whole time. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. Or
Yeah.
even if they're not holding hands, there's no divider, and you can hear all sorts of little cues, guttural sounds from the mother and stuff, and
Yeah.
they're hovering their hand around. So there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical, but I'm an open-minded, skeptical human. So like, if you bring me evidence, I'm totally for it. The thing is, I don't have a cart in the what's the expression? A cart in the horse, or the horse in the
A dog in the fight, a cart. Yeah.
whatever.
Well, yeah. Well, so there the cueing is being done by the facilitator, not the child. It's like a clever Hans effect.
Unfortunately,
Where
it seems to be
the
the
horse
case.
was adding and subtracting and answering questions, and it was picking up cues from the horse owner.
It seems to be the case, but I'm not. Just because some things are not supernatural, in my view, doesn't make it any less miraculous or incredible. So, I mean, like my whole PhD dissertation was about a different form of intelligence than IQ type intelligence, which unconscious intelligence or implicit learning. And I published papers showing that this kind of intelligence, people differ in it, and it is correlated zero with IQ. Like I would literally have people in my experimental room who had the most extraordinary IQ. They consciously tell you the pattern of everything, but they couldn't. They didn't do very well in the unconscious patterns. And so I think there is something I still think remarkable among these autistic savants. I don't know about the telepathy one. I still need to wrap my head around what exactly is going on there. But there are extraordinary cases of music, of art, of a lot of these savants that do really incredible things. And I don't think it makes it any less miraculous. We don't have to go to the supernatural level in order for it to be miraculous, you know?
Right. Well, that's what I would like. But even if you add the supernatural or the paranormal, how are we supposed to measure it if it's literally outside of our measuring technologies?
Well, I just had Dr. Richard Wiseman on my podcast.
Oh, I love.
He's great. He's
Yeah.
great. We had such a great nerdy conversation about this stuff, because we're both into magic and just we have so many mutual interests. And so the thing is, he does. I mean, he tests this stuff. He really does go in with an open mind, and you can't prove the supernatural in a lot of ways, but like if you can start ruling out some confounds. So my colleague Simon Baron Cohen at Cambridge, I almost said Sasha Baron Cohen, who's his cousin, which is Ali G.
Right.
But Simon Baron Cohen and I are trying to design ways of experimentally testing some of these children from the telepathy tapes and really do it right. And if you can start to rule out some of these confounds, I'm not saying you're proving the supernatural, but it's like, at least it's interesting. Like it's interesting if you can start ruling out some of these confounds, but it just hasn't really been ruled out yet. A lot of these confounds.
Yeah, I'm fond of saying there's no such thing as the supernatural, the paranormal. There's just the natural, the normal, and all the stuff we haven't explained yet. And so
you would say that.
Well, but what I mean by that is that
on brand for you.
If there is something that needs explaining, let's find a bottom up mechanistic process by which this works. Like for example, the autistic savants, the calendar calculators. How do they do it? And there's a lot of mystery there. I don't know, and no one that I know of thinks there's anything paranormal going on. It's just one of these incredible feats. Now, back when Randy was pretty actively involved in the 90s, I met Arthur Benjamin, who is a lightning calculator. He's a math professor out of Harvey Mudd, but he can do lightning calculations in his head faster than people can do it on their calculators. Until you get to like multiplying two 5-digit numbers, then it takes him a few minutes to do it. But he explains exactly how it's done. There's a process to it, and he's just really practiced at it and really good at math. And, we wrote a book together. It's basically his book I was just described. And I got to where I could do it a little bit, like, hey, I'm getting pretty good at this. And then like 6 months go by and I'm describing the book and to somebody and they go, well, give me an example. And I'm like, oh, and then it's like, oh, I have no idea how to do this anymore. It's just like, you got to practice it. Then now how the savants do it. Okay. You mentioned, this implicit learning, maybe they don't even know how they do it. It just kind of, it's like when Bobby Fischer was asked, how do you know that was the right move to checkmate that guy? And he's like, I don't know. It was the right move. I just know. Well, how do you know? Right. But, and he knows somehow, but his conscious mind doesn't access how his, whatever part of his mind is doing those calculations.
Yeah, for sure. But there are different explanations for different phenomena. So, looking into the literature on synesthesia, it really does aid you in memorizing large quantities of information. For instance, Daniel Tammet, who can memorize so many digits of pi.
Oh yeah.
He uses his synesthesia to help him with that. Because if you can really chunk things, if your brain automatically, you can associate colors with certain words, that you're automatically chunking large streams of information, So it is that's one potential explanation for some of these feats is the brain is wired in some pretty unique ways that associates cross modalities that are not really crossed in most of us.
Yeah. So, okay. So the title, Rise Above.
Back to Rise Above.
There was a movie called African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, in which he says, nature, Mr. Alnut, is what we were put on this earth to rise above.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, what's the point? What are you trying to telegraph here with your title?
Well, I felt like we lived in a very big victimhood culture right now. And everyone's putting the blame on someone else for all of our life problems, or entire groups of people for all our life problems. And I kept finding over and over again in my research that vulnerable narcissism, a particular form of narcissism that is associated with this victim mindset, is the biggest inhibitor of self-actualization a person could have. You can't self-actualize if you don't take any responsibility for how you show up in this world, or your attempts to be a better person or to overcome things. And so I felt like it was a real important time for me to put together all this over 10 years of research specifically on this topic, and then link it, as you see, I link it even in chapter 10 to groups, and it all seems so relevant right now. Everywhere I look, everyone is externalizing the blame for all their problems outside of themselves.
Yeah, it is good timing, particularly that last chapter. I guess the question is, what's the problem to be solved here? Is it that there's an increase in depression, anxiety, and I don't know, deaths of despair and all that kind of stuff, and you're looking at that?
Well, I look at it from a self-actualization point of view. I teach the science of living well at Columbia. I care about my students and their self-actualization, and I care about adults too. And I have training programs. I create a form of coaching I call self-actualization coaching, where we're training coaches in a lot of these methods to help clients really regain a sense of agency in their lives, regardless of where they've been or whatever they've been through. I really want to make it clear that you can have a trauma without being traumatized, and you can be a victim without having a victim mindset. You can also not have been a victim and have a victim mindset, and that's a whole different class of dark triad individuals. But I don't know, what do you want to take up first?
Well, I guess that's a good place to start. I guess what do you mean by trauma? There's real trauma. Somebody has PTSD after serving 3 tours of duty in Iraq. Okay, no one's going to dispute that, I think. And then you get the blue-haired screamers at the college campuses that are, upset about something, and they're traumatized and claim they have PTSD because of some little slight. Somebody mispronounced them or something. And most people look at that and go, oh, come on, that's not trauma. But in between, then you have kind of regular life, right? My parents are divorced, or, I was divorced, I lost my job, or I didn't get to pursue the career I wanted. And these kind of add up to, I don't know, tiny little traumas that kind of burden you and lead to, I don't know, alcoholism or, self-medication through drugs or whatever. So I kind of think of it as those 3 categories, but I don't know. How do you think about it?
Oh boy. Okay. This is a really it really, you're like, let's just jump into the deep end.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
In part, you're like, why not? In part, my book is a reaction to this idea that we have the predominant narrative, which is that trauma is everywhere. And I mean, the word trauma must be so exhausted from doing so much work right now. If you read Gabor Mate's writings, he says we're all traumatized at all times by everything.
Oh my God.
um, and
Yeah.
and that ADHD, and he basically says everything that is all psychopathologies is all because of trauma. Look, that's not the truth. We need a much more accurate, realistic understanding of not only trauma but also what makes us who we are. Um, so I do bring in the dirty word genes, the dirty G word in
That's
my
not a
book.
dirty word here.
No, it's not, it's not, and it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. People don't really understand how horrible it would be to live in a completely environmentally determined world. Some people seem to think that's like genes is bad, and that what's the alternative? The reality of the matter is we're a mix of nature and nurture. It's a very delicate dance, but that often pre-existing personality differences is what is actually driving and coloring our perceptions of the world and what we experience and how we interpret situations. You can actually take two people who, um, fraternal twins, who maybe share 50% of the same genes, grow up in the same environment, and have completely different experiences. One could say we had complete trauma, in the environment. My mother was horrible, whatever. The other would say, "What are you talking about? It was a great childhood." And you see this a lot with siblings. Um, so there, in a lot of ways, trauma is the story that you're telling yourself about a challenging experience that uh, horrible things do happen. Like, let's be very clear about that. And I have a lot of compassion for that. But um, the way we interpret our experiences matters so much. And in part, my book is a challenge to the predominant sort of way that we talk about how one should respond to all challenges in life.
Yeah. I guess starting by defining that, what you mean by trauma, giving us an operational definition, and then working from that with the person's own subjective interpretation of what's traumatic for them
Mm.
versus some kind of objective standard.
Yeah, I do define trauma as anything that fundamentally changes your view of the safety of the world and causes a seismic change in your worldview and really violates your expectations of the world. A lot of things can really shake us up in a really big way, and a lot of that is quite traumatizing. But researchers have started to move more towards a different language. Language matters here. So, for instance, George Bonanno calls these kinds of experiences potentially traumatizing experiences. He doesn't. He's not quick to label everything as trauma. A lot of it comes down to the individual and how it's almost like can we give the individual a choice on how they would like to cope and interpret a situation. It's become a little bit controversial, but I'm all for some of these different approaches instead of trauma informed therapy. Um, People are saying let's change the language to resilient capable therapy. You know, like why do we frame everything like um, whenever an individual enters a form of therapy, why is the default assumption that you have to go into this mode where, oh my God, that's so horrible what happened to you, you must be traumatized, and let's just talk about your trauma. And especially with children, there's been guidelines that I really like, which say, don't assume whatever happened to the child, whatever the thing that happened to them, don't assume that child's traumatized. Like, why are you assuming it? Let the child meet them where they are, talk to them, you know, don't create trauma in their life if it didn't in their narrative, if it wasn't there. But trauma informed therapy is just all about just, validating trauma. I don't see too much forward movement from there to like, well, let's create a life of hope. Oh, you have a lot of resilience. That's what I'm all about in this book, is an empowerment mindset. Yes, and yes, a shitty thing has happened to you, and you got this. I just don't see that. I don't see the yes end of this. I see a shitty thing that happened to you, and therefore it's okay if you're an asshole. It's okay how you treat others. It's okay how you show up. If you're suffering, if you're suffering, you get a free pass.
Yeah. So there's, I guess, research on this that you discuss in the book about the effects of dwelling on bad things, and that makes it even worse. That is, you're kind of ruminating, cogitating, dwelling on it, and it becomes, therefore, something like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe it wasn't going to be that bad, but you made it bad by talking about it.
Well, you just said it.
Yeah. Well, when I was teaching Chapman, I had 18-year-old students right out of high school. And, quite a few of them, maybe a quarter to a third, had some separation anxiety from the parents and homesickness, all that stuff. But a few of them had, some traumas in high school, and I could see it was holding them back. One girl was, telling me her story, sort of a sexual assault encounter in high school or whatever. And now, like 2 years later, she's still feeling like she can't do anything. And I told her in a kind of nice way I could, is like, well, he is still assaulting you then. You're still, he probably doesn't even know who you are, where you are now. He's just off doing his thing. And you're sitting here and it's still happening.
Yeah. I have to be very careful not to say, I'm not saying just get over it already. You know? But as Irving Yalom says, and this quote summarizes my whole book, sooner or later, you have to give up hope for a better past.
Oh, that's such a great line. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the point of my book. I want to help people if they're ready. See, not everyone, I'm also, and we'll see what your thoughts are on this, but I'm a big believer that there's no one correct way to heal. And we have a lot of people telling others how they should heal, right? So sometimes I'll get lectured, that my ideas are, quote, problematic because I haven't taken into account Black people, for instance. Okay, and so I'm a very direct, and maybe a little bit on the autism spectrum. So I'm like a no bullshit guy. So I'm like when I don't buy bullshit. Like when people say that to me, I say this. I say, okay, if you think I'm racist for believing that Black people have a higher potential, then so be it. I'm racist. If racist to you means that I actually believe that they're just as capable, that Black people are just as capable of overcoming hardships as white people, then I'm racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
that's always bothered me.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know. There's that phrase, the, bigotry of low expectations.
Well, that's what it is. That's what it is. We're seeing that everywhere right now. I remember in college admissions, when I grew up, it was rewarded to overcome the hardship. Now you get into college for just having the hardship. What happened?
Right. That's right. Can you give us an overview of the most effective or least effective treatments that we have, like cognitive behavior therapy versus just talking therapy versus medications and drugs versus just having a good friend versus doing nothing or going away to a retreat or, whatever?
You want to know the scientific efficacy of different therapy forms?
Yeah.
Okay.
It probably depends on what it is we're talking about, but trauma of some kind.
It's a complex question, like all these kind of things we're talking about. But CBT has a pretty good track record right now, and ACT has a really good research base associated with it. It's actually the ACT approach. My friend who founded it, Hayes, would get mad at me if I said ACT. It's not an acronym, Scott, but it's just ACT. But
it's not an acronym? Oh, well, okay.
He says that, but it actually does stand for acceptance and commitment therapy. So I don't understand why.
Acceptance and commitment. Acceptance of what? That the trauma was real, but then...
Well, whatever it is, whatever you accept, experiential avoidance is the opposite of psychological flexibility. And the spirit of the ACT approach is that we need to develop some psychological flexibility, not be so avoidant of all the things that we fear in our lives, but move towards what we want in the spirit of our values. Now, there are other therapies that are very, very popular in the trauma-informed world, and I mean popular to the degree that it's almost cult-like popular. So you're not allowed to disagree or have any. So, for instance, Dick Schwartz, internal family systems theory. In the trauma-informed world, it is the Bible, you know?
What is it again?
Family systems theory.
Family systems. Yeah.
Yeah, internal family systems. So I think there's a lot of wisdom to it, but I don't think we should treat any form of therapy as gospel. You know, like as I was like, it's beyond criticism. A lot of that work has not been peer reviewed. You know, I mean, if you say that, you really will. This is really dangerous territory right now to to say that. But I think that on the one hand, there is a lot of great benefits to that form of therapy. I think that it's good to tap into the different sides of yourself, and the parts you'd call it, doing parts work can be beneficial. But you asked me in terms of what has been rigorously studied. CBT has been rigorously studied. ACT approach has been rigorously studied. Meditation, interestingly enough, some research suggests that psilocybin in collaboration with meditation and spiritual practices shows a greater effect than any of them alone. Which
these are the microdosing things.
Yeah,
people have been trying.
Yeah, so there's something there. There's something there about being able to integrate your experiences under certain drugs, shall we say? And yeah, spiritual practices. I'm a big fan of self-transcendent experiences. I mean, that was the point. That was the takeaway of the book Transcend. Was there a lot of just getting like joy from your work and getting into a flow state is so therapeutic. You forget all your problems when you're with someone you love, and you can be in a flow state with a human, or if you're in a flow state with your work. I think it's scientifically shown to increase well-being. Yeah.
And I guess what I'm after there is when we say it doesn't work, what do you mean by work? So on the one hand, if somebody says, I went to Deepak's place and I meditated for a week and man, my life is so much better. Okay. But of course, what Deepak wants to argue is that it's not just good for that person, just randomly. Yeah. It's good for everybody. Or 80% of people that tried meditating 20 minutes a day, 6 days a week, and then they did the green tea and then they do yoga, whatever the combination is, that lowers their blood pressure, or it lowers their stress hormones, or they have less thought flooding of negative thoughts, and they report being happier by 2 points on a 1 to 10 scale, that kind of thing. He's looking for some kind of metric for that. And I suppose what I'm asking is, which of the techniques we have for dealing with trauma or being a victim or whatever, are of those kinds where we could say, yeah, it really does work. Here's the evidence. Or, well, it maybe worked for you, but doesn't work for somebody else, and who knows?
Michael, I want to have a little bit of humility here in one sense. My book is not about trauma, actually.
Yeah.
It's not about helping people who really have trauma. It's how we overuse that word so much, to the extent to which we're applying all these trauma techniques to people who are having normal, ordinary human experiences of life. And I think I need to emphasize that point. I think that for the large majority of people reading my book, techniques like CBT, techniques like the ACT approach I was just talking about, meditation, really challenging your cognitive distortions, and also emotional regulation techniques go such a long way and are so much more helpful than immediately blaming all of your uncomfortable emotions on trauma. But actually learning techniques to cope with your uncomfortable emotions is a more productive way forward for the large majority of humans who are having normal human experiences. It's almost like we've reached a point in our society where we we don't allow ourselves to not be happy anymore. The expectation, the default expectation is that we should be happy, you know? And so in a lot of ways, it's really written for that large swath. When you start asking me questions about, real trauma techniques that's a whole different kind of literature. And I'm not actually an expert on that. And I want to have that humility, but my book is really written for most people who may be told that trauma approaches apply to them because they have back pain, or trauma approaches apply to them because they get nervous every now and then, as opposed to like actually normalizing getting nervous every now and then.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of Ellen DeGeneres' riffs on those commercials for antidepressants, and do you ever have feelings of being sad and sometimes lonely and anxious? And she says, "Yeah, I'm alive."
That's exactly right. I have a section called "Warning: You might have a case of life" in my book, in my intro. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's that kind of middle section I was talking about at the beginning. That almost everybody has something or a bunch of things that happens just all the time. I mean, there's people I don't like, and people say things in the parking lot or flip you off on the freeway, or your parents are divorced, or you got divorced, or you lost your job, or I don't know, just the normal kind of, just the rough spots of life. That's how it goes. That's normal.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is normal. There are just certain givens of human existence. And again, I really like the existential humanistic perspective that Irv Yalom brings to the table. He called them givens of existence. We all want to have a connection with someone else. We all want to feel some sense of mastery for what we do, and you can go on and on. I have a whole hierarchy of needs that I talk about. But the more we can recognize that we all kind of have these needs, the more I think it gives us connection to each other. The more you have a victim mindset or vulnerable narcissism, where you think you're like, I'm gonna view suffering as a competition, and because I'm suffering the most, therefore I deserve the most out of life. That mentality is so holding you back from not only your self-actualization, but just forming connections with others, just listening to the pain of other people, right? Like just recognizing you're not the only one suffering.
Is that one of the values of those support groups, with that you're just meeting other people that have also gone through this, and somehow they came out the other side, or they're getting through it?
I love support groups.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good having friends. I just want to say that as well. Like, it's good to have friends that you can bitch to and complain. And, when I say, overcome a victim mindset, I'm not saying toughen up, buttercup. Like, I'm not saying that.
Don't be a snowflake.
Yeah. I'm not saying that. I actually, in trying to find my voice for this book, I found it by saying I offer honest love, which I think is different than the two extremes, which I see everywhere. I see either coddling, which I see coddling all over Instagram in the trauma world. It's like, oh, you have trauma. It's okay to just sit in your room all day and do nothing with the rest of your life. It's okay. You have trauma. Like, I don't know how empowering that is, to be honest. But then on the other side, I see the
not at all. You're being modest there. Yeah, I think it's harmful.
Yeah, I think it's harmful too. And then the other extreme, you see pull yourself up by your bootstrap, completely ignores the support structures that could be really helpful to people. And it just neither of those extremes really sat well with my voice. So honest love to me is the love part is validating, non-judgmentally, that someone's experience is valid. So if someone comes to you and they're like, I just got punched by someone and my face hurts. Like, you don't say, stop your bitching,
Right.
like, just get over it. I also think coddling, it can be disempowering. I think that's where the truth comes in, which is, oh man, that really sucks. Like, that's a bad thing that happened to you just now. And guess what? You have what it takes to overcome this. Right? Like let's, and I just think we need more of that kind of yes and thinking in our society. I see it lacking.
And do you agree then with that hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff in The Coddling of the American Mind, that this is the primary explanation for the spike in teen depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, cutting, and all that kind of stuff.
A big
Coddling.
part of it for sure. In fact, Jonathan's going to be interviewing me about my book for my podcast.
Oh, nice.
So folks can
That's nice.
listen
Well,
out
but then
about
there's
that.
counters to that. The screen time, social media, fear of missing out, and all that. Maybe that's also a factor.
Well, I have a section on social media and how it rewards a victim mindset, and it amplifies it. I think that a lot of young people feel like they can't get likes unless they have some disorder. It's on TikTok. You need something. Are you trans? Are you non-binary? Are you autistic? What are you? And so kids are, already teenagers are grappling with identity issues throughout the course of human history. That's nothing new. But now the kids who are going through a natural identity crisis feel the need to grasp onto something so that they can be accepted.
Yeah, well, it's like what's going on at Columbia now, and the whole Arab-Israeli problem, and all these kids that have no connection to this whatsoever, but they feel like they want to be empathetic to the victims. Okay, but who are the victims? Now, it used to be the Jews were the victims, and somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 1960s and last year, 2 years ago, Jews got some sympathy, and then all of a sudden, they're the oppressors, and we have a new victim group that we can identify with. I always wondered, to what extent do these kids have any personal connection to it at all? I mean, if there was no news and they didn't know about it, what would they be agitated about?
Yeah. And there are so many causes one could take up. There are so many forms of oppression going on around the world right now. There is something a little bit insidious, I hope I pronounced that word correctly, going on if we really look beneath the surface, that even if it's not explicitly said, it is something that is anti-Semitic specifically.
Oh yeah,
it's not as innocent as some of the activists make it seem, and I think that needs to be called out.
Absolutely, it's always the Jews. Sooner or later, it's coming out.
Because there are many sort of real forms of oppression going on around the world, which college students could be protesting legitimately,
Right.
but they're not. And people don't get up in arms. AOC, others, they don't get up in arms around these other things. They get up in arms about a particular thing, the Muslims. And so I'm not stupid.
Yes. No, it's not called the world's oldest prejudice for nothing.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that. I was tweeting yesterday about the, like the firebombing of Tesla cars and that kind of stuff going on. Have they looked at Henry Ford's past? His anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
I mean, why aren't they firebombing Ford Motor Company dealerships?
That's actually a really good point. I had not thought about that.
Oh, he was a rabid, well, I'm sure a rabid anti-Semite. He published multi-volume, The International Jew. And after he died, his, the execs at Ford tried to buy up as many copies as they could so they could destroy him. But, but it's out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have some sympathy for the Cybertruck thing because I don't find it a very visually appealing car.
I don't want to drive one, but so.
Yeah. No, I'm obviously joking. I don't condone blowing up cars.
I wanted to ask you about that book, still on the New York Times bestseller list, just checking. The Body Knows the Score.
Oh, the body.
I haven't read this, but the thesis, is that
keeps the score.
Body keeps the score. Yeah. So, trauma builds up throughout your life, and even multi-generationally, that the children, the grandchildren of
there's actually
Holocaust,
no evidence.
Is there any evidence for that?
There's actually there's evidence contradicting intergenerational trauma, and that is so controversial to say that, but I can literally send studies to someone who's really cares about the facts and the data. There's such limited evidence that is actually how it works. That there is that kind of transmission. There are a lot of claims made in The Body Keeps the Score that resonate with a lot of people and how they want the world to be. And so it really strikes a nerve. There's something seductive about being able to blame all your problems on your mother. Do you know what I mean?
What is that?
There is
or
something,
your father.
or your father. That's true. The mother usually gets the brunt of it, unfortunately. Um, but I mean, I guess nowadays masculinity is under fire too. But that's different topic. But I think that there is something very seductive about a victim mindset. See, as far as I'm concerned, The Body Keeps the Score is one big victim mindset book. Especially with a lot of Gabor Mate's books, which are so popular right now. But the whole thing is like, it's the toxic society. It's not you. There is something very seductive about that way of thinking. There was a woman who recently wrote a book. It's called It's Not You, written for women, about your narcissistic husband. The book did so well, and I had her on my podcast, and I think her heart's in the right place, and I have deep respect for her. But like, how dare I even question that, like, could the woman ever play a role at all in this? Is it? And I got so much hate mail from her fans, about
You did?
how dare you, even insinuate that it's not all the narcissist's fault. And I guess, like, for me, I'm always skeptical when we say it's not you. When we, and I'm also, want to be compassionate here and say sometimes we are dealing with real assholes, absolutely. But whenever there's a message for you to absolve your responsibility completely for all your problems, it raises an antenna for me.
Well, you've written and talked on your podcast about free will and agency.
Yeah. It also strips your agency away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't find it very empowering. I find it much more empowering. For instance, I have a whole section of my book on codependency, and usually in those kind of situations, both of them are Meshuggah. For lack of a more sensitive way of putting it, both of them have their own issues that they're taking advantage of each other for. You usually have a grandiose narcissist manipulating a vulnerable narcissist. And and neither are taking responsibility for it. And I think a big empowering thing is to recognize the patterns of what you're going through and to be like, no, this is not the healthy pattern that I want to be living in, and I'm going to choose a healthier pattern. To me, that's just feels like it gives you more agency than to feel like you're stuck in something. Am I crazy for saying that?
No, but are there sex differences in measures of narcissism, or for that matter, the other dark triad, Machiavellianism?
Well, there absolutely is. I mean, we have found that on the dark triad measures, it is by far a male thing. When you look at the tails, we're talking like the most striking differences you could in anything in psychology. Like I've never seen anything like this. 2-3 standard deviations above the mean. Males score higher in, like, psychopathy, for instance.
Right.
You do tend to find a slight female higher scores on vulnerable narcissism scales because it's linked to the trait neuroticism, which we know females tend to score higher on than males. But there's so much nuance here. There are actually two components of neuroticism when you actually look at, and it breaks down into different gender differences based on the different aspects of neuroticism you're looking at. There's like a volatility component and there's a withdrawal component. There are two different forms of neuroticism, and so there's nuance here.
Yeah, remember when that Google programmer James Damore got fired after writing about the Big Five and said that women score higher on neuroticism? I think people didn't realize that's an actual term used in the Big Five personality theory.
It is.
Maybe they need a different word because it sounds like you're calling women neurotic, like guys are never neurotic or something like that.
That's true.
But what is it really trying to? What's it describing?
My publisher, first of all, didn't want me to use the word neurotic. So
really?
I had, they wanted me to strike that from the record. So I went to great pains to define it in my book and talk about how this is something we all can have from time to time. Neuroticism is, your mind is constantly feeding you ruminative thoughts. You're emotionally volatile. You have your moods fluctuate. In a ways, it's the opposite of a stolid temperament.
So am I a narcissist? Well, I think of it as a spectrum. I think I'm a pretty typical, careerist guy that just works a lot and focused on my ideas in my head. I'm like walking around at home with the family thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow or that thing in the book I'm going to write about or whatever. And I have to kind of autocorrect like, hey, don't forget to pay attention to the people in the room. So am I a narcissist and or what? How do you measure that?
Well, before you do that, I did some research in the background here about neuroticism. On
Oh yeah.
average,
Okay.
women do tend to score higher in all neuroticism aspects. But if you really double click on it, there are certain items, certain aspects of volatility that men do, like anger, for instance. So if you want to talk about the anger aspects of the volatility facet, men do relative to women. But overall, on the board, women do tend to score higher on all forms of neuroticism.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wanted to say that. Um, excuse me. So are you a narcissist? Well, first of all, you can take the light versus dark triad test on my website, at selfactualizationtests.com. And it'll tell you where you are on whether or not you're a Yoda or you're a Darth Vader. If you want to pause and spend the 5 minutes and take the test, we can do that. It's up to you.
I think let's just keep going. I'll do it
Okay.
later. Actually, I think I might have done that back with your previous book. Have you had that up for a while?
The big thing, yeah, I've had it up for a while. The big
Yeah, I did
part
something
of
on your side. I took some
the big
test on your
part
side.
of yeah, the big thing with narcissism is how entitled are you? Entitlement is the core aspect. If you're a grandiose narcissist, or you score very high in grandiose narcissism, because it's a continuum we all differ on, then you tend to feel entitled to special privileges because you think you're superior. You just think you're inherently superior to others. If you score high in vulnerable narcissism, you feel like you're entitled to special privileges because you're vulnerable and you've suffered in the past. So they're two different forms of entitlement.
Interesting.
Grandiose
Okay.
based and vulnerable based entitlement.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really know what I am. I never quite know what to think about those things. Like the way I am now is a product of my past. Maybe like I'm big on avoiding conflict with other people. I just walk away. I just put it off. If I have to tell somebody some bad news, I just put it off as long as I can. So like going through marriage counseling with the first marriage, it's like, oh, let's look in your past. And, my parents were divorced. And then, so I split my time between two homes. I was very young. And then vague memories I have, like of my mother sending me off to my father's home for the weekend, dropping me off Friday afternoon, pick up Sunday night. Kind of how it was done in the 60s, where the guy got like weekends and then every other weekend, that sort of thing. And so if she needed me back early, she would say, now tell your father that I need to pick you up Sunday morning rather than Sunday night because we got this other thing going on. Just like, I'd spend the whole weekend just dreading having to tell my dad I have to go home early. Now, my mom was great, but, she should not have put that on me. But did that really have an effect on me? Is this really why I avoid conflict? Or does nobody like conflict? And that's kind of normal. And some people are able to overcome that. And good for them, but I'm not actually abnormal.
Well, some people love conflict. Some people thrive on it. And there's actually a trait called the high drama personality. You can take that scale, and people who score high in the high drama personality, they really seek it out. They seek out as much drama as possible.
What do they get from it?
Makes them feel alive.
Oh, I see. Gives them a little adrenaline or something. Not me.
Yeah.
I'll get it from sports or something, but not human conflict. I don't like that. Yeah.
I don't love conflict either.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing for the first time in my life conflict with this book.
You are? Why?
Well, just because there's the large majority of people really appreciate this way of healing, but there are people who, from the trauma-informed perspective, who are holding on to their way as the only way for people to heal. They don't like my message. So
because it feels like you're blaming the victim.
That's one part of it. I've gotten victim blaming, which is really not what I'm doing. But there's this. There's a certain minority of people who really think, well, you're privileged, so this book only applies to privileged people. Like, we're getting this earlier, like, oh, well, like this is not accessible to queer people or
Oh, I
black
see. I
people,
see.
and they'll list a certain set of people who this can't apply to. And we talked about this earlier. I mean, I just that's not my worldview. My worldview is one that I believe in the higher potential of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, all you're doing in your book is asking, does it work? What can we do to actually solve a problem?
Yeah,
Forget the labels or who's to blame or whatever. Does it work? That
yeah,
seems reasonable.
yeah, yeah. And the privilege one, on the one hand, I am sympathetic to this criticism of me. I'm sympathetic to it because we should recognize that not everyone has equal access to therapy, for instance, or to certain medical things, and when people are suffering, and I think that's a separate issue. I think that there's a system issue, and then there's an individual issue, and I'm just tackling the individual issue. Like I'm tackling what can you do, given you can't change the past, given that you're in this circumstance. What is the most optimal? What not? I don't even like the word optimal. What is the most productive way of living your life? What's constructive here and what's not constructive? And that's the way I think about it. But it's that gets some pushback.
Kind of a stoic philosophy in the sense that, well, you can't change the past. So how can you go forward with the past in mind without dwelling on it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people set up a mental prison that they think is inescapable, and I really think in a large majority of cases it is escapable. And we need to give. I just believe we need to give people more that memo than the opposite memo, which is you're stuck. You know, like some of the messages by I guess well-meaning people that one would call them woke, maybe, like like this kind of paternalistic, or this kind of like I know what's best for all black people, like this kind of way of thinking. You're the same. Like there are a lot of people with these savior complexes, and I just don't think there's one way for everyone to heal. And I want to offer a different perspective that a lot more people might resonate with than the one that's been predominantly out there. And luckily it is resonating with just even this excerpt I published in Psychology Today. A lot of people are like, this is exactly what I needed to hear in this time in my life, and that
Really?
excites
Okay.
me because
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the point of the book. And I'm not trying to say that this is for everyone, but there are a lot of people that are ready in their journey. They're like, they've had enough of talk therapy about their trauma. Like, can we give it to people to be done with it, or do we have to force people to keep doing it if it's not bringing them any growth or happiness in their life?
Yeah, that phrase, you got to do the work. That doesn't sound like fun. What work? I'm busy. Yeah. Let's talk about your chapter on self-esteem, because that's long fascinated me. What went wrong with that whole 1980s, 90s? Everybody gets a gold star and no one's a loser, and this is going to help people. Why didn't that work?
Well, we have to distinguish between healthy, real, authentic self-esteem and narcissism, because what happened with the '80s self-esteem movement is it really was a narcissism movement, as far as I'm concerned. It was a grandiose narcissism movement. Not and it's interesting. So if you look at self-esteem and you look at narcissism, you realize that they have two completely different trajectories. They're independent constructs. So in adolescence, narcissism actually peaks in adolescence and then declines throughout our lives, where self-esteem is at its lowest in adolescence and increases as we get older.
So interesting.
Self-esteem is a good thing. So self-esteem is just simply I'm worth it. That's it. Not that I'm better than others, but that I'm worthy. Somehow this message I'm worthy did get turned into a whole generation of grandiose narcissists who said we're the best. I had a great conversation with Jean Twenge about this
Right.
for my podcast, because I told her I think that the current generation is a nation of vulnerable narcissists, and she agreed. She agreed. The self-esteem movement morphed into a grandiose narcissist movement, which I think then morphed into what we're seeing now, which is a vulnerable narcissist movement. We should have a movement of a next generation. How can we raise? This is my question for raising the next generation of kids. How can we raise them to just have a healthy self-esteem and just be content with that?
Well, yeah, I think it's by doing things. by
It's by doing
accomplishing
things.
things.
It's by actually doing things.
Yeah.
It's by, I'll go even one step further. That's a really good point, by the way. It's by having healthy pride, not hubristic pride, right? Actually, and also not being taught the lesson that you can only demand things in life. You can't demand respect without contributing anything. That's not how life works.
Well, so Jean Twenge, I loved her Generations book. I had her on the show. Life history theory, so that the longer people live and the safer our lives are, thanks to modern technology and vaccines and public health and all that stuff, the slower your life can develop, and therefore the later in life you need to have kids, get married, get a driver's license, develop your career. Everything goes slower. But then you're also more risk averse because you just have this one kid or just have this one shot at it, as opposed to earlier generations that didn't experience that. What do you think? How do you integrate that into what you're doing here?
So what is the specific datum that you're talking about?
This is Jean Twenge's life. She's applying life history theory to explaining what she doesn't think it's coddling of the of parents of kids, like Jonathan Haidt thinks. She thinks it's more like that's normal to be highly risk averse if you only have one kid.
I see.
And like her data point is that, women of my generation, baby boomers, I was born in 54, their average first pregnancy was age 19. It is now 29. It's a full decade slower. And, people are getting married later. They're having fewer kids. They're developing their careers slower and later.
Wow.
And it just kind of trickles from the bottom up where, none of your peers are getting married right out of high school. They're all going to college. So, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And no one's talking about getting married and having kids at 22 right out of college. Like, okay, yeah, I'll just do what my peers are doing and get a job, develop a career. Everything happens slower. Therefore, when you finally have your one kid, you're super risk averse. And so you don't, you coddle them, I guess. You're just super worried about something that could happen to them. Whereas if you had 5 kids and you just throw them out and, see you back here at dinner time.
The life history strategy is one that I've been long very curious and interested about, because there's some really interesting epigenetic effects there for sure, and the extent to which certain more risk prone genes can become active from certain harsh and unpredictable environments. So I'm trying to wrap my head, because there's actually a new argument from Jean. I didn't know about this one from Jean, so this is the first time I'm processing it. She does not buy the coddling angle. Instead, she buys what? What's the opposite?
Well, it's just parents are more risk averse because they only have one child, and they've waited for a long time to do that, and therefore they're just
it's not coddling.
It's more cautious. Yeah, coddling has a negative valence to it.
Right.
It's kind of normal if you just have one to do that. So she's looking for a deeper causal mechanism, which she's putting at, kind of generational long changes. Her book has just tons of data about this.
Well, I honestly find that really fascinating, and something that I'm going to have to look into deeper. But there really is something there with the coddling. I wouldn't throw the coddling out with the bathwater, even with this theory, because you do see a lot of reverse CBT among young people today, where there's a lot of catastrophizing. There's a lot of black and white thinking. Like, you literally go down the list, it's like anti-CBT.
Yes.
And that's real. I mean, that is so obvious. So we're doing something in our education system that, call it whatever you want. Maybe coddling isn't the right word for it, but we're allowing young people to have really distorted ways of thinking and a victim mindset that is not productive or helpful. We're almost rewarding it in a way.
Yeah. Here's a fun example. So I'm out on a bike ride with my little guy. My son's 8, with one of his friends down this little dirt path, and he's never ridden on dirt paths. So we were just kind of going along, and then we started hot dogging a little bit, and he crashed. I mean, it was I mean, a big tumble into the bushes, helmets over his face, and he's crying and really upset. So I just got him up and kind of shook him off, got the bike back in, okay. And he's like, I'm just going to walk back. I don't want to ride anymore. No, back on the bike. Here we go. And, by the time we got back to the house, everything was fine. And to me, it was like, yeah, I could have just kind of coddled him all the way back and helped his tears and all this stuff. But instead, like, let's just now you've learned something. You can have a crash, because I've had plenty, and you can just get back up and it's okay. Everything is all right. Nothing's broken.
That's the way.
There's no blood, right? It's just okay. And then back on the bike you go, back on the horse kind of thing, right? But that's so old school. I mean, come on. Doesn't everybody know that? What happened? I mean,
something happened.
Yeah, something happened. I mean, you have all this section. Let me just riff through these: virtue of character, strengths, and virtues. Virtue of wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. This is like Aristotle's virtue ethics. I mean, this is old stuff. And it seems like we've lost that.
Well, we absolutely have lost it. And we're not really educating for it. I mean, imagine if we treated education in the same the mentality in the same way that we elite athletes treat their sport. I mean, you would never be climbing Mount Everest and start cursing the winds and get a victim mindset for like, oh, the winds are assaulting me. How dare this happen to me? The world's against me. Like, like we want to set kids up for the mindset for success in life, and we're not doing that.
Right. Yeah. Remember the who's the tennis pro, the Japanese woman also. She won 4 majors. I can't believe I'm spacing on her name. And 4 Grand Slams, and then
Naomi Osaka,
right? So she retires early because she's got psychological problems. This ends up being a culture war debate for a few days everywhere. And, old school athletes are like, just get back out there and shut up. Right. And then other people going, hey, this is a normal thing. People have emotional issues, and that we should, address that. And I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying get back out there and shut up. And I think, it goes a long way having the love part of honest love. But a lot of people who are training for things assume that there's going to be bumps in the road throughout the training process. And there's certain cultures where it's assumed that life is not going to be easy. It just feels like people nowadays, just their basic assumption is that they should be happy all the time, or that bad things shouldn't happen to them, or challenging things shouldn't happen to them. And I'm not going to the trauma level, but I'm just saying people, even to the extent to which, I should never feel anxious, or got to immediately find a medication for that, or, or I should never feel angry, and I just think that like athletes get it. Like it's, there's going to be a lot of challenges, like Michael Jordan's not going to shoot a basket and then he misses the basket and gives up. It's like, that's it. I'm done. Yeah, I know. I hear myself talk right now, by the way, and I'm like, I sound really old school.
You do.
But something happened
I know,
where this has become controversial.
And it shouldn't be. Maybe this is in part an explanation for the Jordan Peterson effect. Why is he so popular? Because he's saying some of these really basic things. Make your bed every morning, have a goal, work out, eat healthy, be polite and respectful to other people. Write down your goals in life and set them up, and, get up in the morning. Okay, I'm going to do this and this. Really, you need to be told this? I mean, doesn't everybody know this? No, apparently not.
Yeah. It's just, that's the darn truth.
So, okay, a couple other things here. Yeah, so you hear strengths from adversity. I'm just going through some of the sections in your book. So that's what you're talking about. That, in fact, probably happiness is the wrong goal. Maybe it's more purposefulness, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I mean, there's research showing that, first of all, the pursuit of happiness is exhausting. So there's research showing that those who score higher, this study actually just came out recently showing that those who report greater pursuit of happiness tend to have less self-control for things in their life that are ultimately going to lead them to be less happy. Like
Really?
they're more likely to overeat. They're more likely, they just lose it's so exhausting trying to pursue happiness all the time that from from a depletion perspective, it depletes your self-control reserves so much that you're just like, oh, forget it. I'm going to,
Right.
indulge in all of these short-term pleasures and things. So there is research on that. And also, and just in general, so much research shows the more you try to shoot for happiness, the less happy you become. But I do, as I teach in my Science of Living Well class, I mean, it's all about what Aristotle said, right? It's all about self-actualizing your potential with virtue. And I mean, it's not rocket science what it means to live a good life. I mean, religious people will say you gotta be religious in order to do that. Or else how are you gonna have any code? You hear that all the time by, how can an atheist have any code of ethics? But
Right.
I think that anyone, regardless of your belief system of God, can read, if, what it means to live, can get what it means to live a good life. Like it's not that rocket science, but we don't do it.
Right. Yeah, I think the pursuit of purpose and meaning, which you get from doing things that aren't necessarily fun. I mean, today, for example, I spent maybe 6 hours tracking down the permissions for photo reproduction in my next book, right?
Hmm.
This is not a fun experience. I was not
Doesn't
happy
sound
at
fun.
all. But at the end, I felt like, hey, I did it. I finally finished this damn thing that's been in the back of my head for 3 months. I got to do this. I don't want to do it. And I finally did it and got it done and then felt good about that. Like, yeah, I feel really good. I accomplished that thing. It wasn't fun at all doing it.
Well, sometimes overcoming challenges makes us much happier in the long run than not. I mean, there is the famous philosophical experiment. Would you rather be injected with something that puts you in a vat where you just are fed happy experiences throughout your entire life, or would you rather not and have to face challenges and hardships? Most people actually would choose the hardships.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. I would.
yeah.
I mean, right. Otherwise, you're just a brain in a vat. So what? What is the satisfaction in that?
But there's also a great satisfaction in dealing with things that you fear and overcoming them and realizing that you can handle it. It kind of like levels you up. You can keep leveling up in life by adding on as more challenging experiences as you possibly can that you can overcome. I mean, I have so many fears, and so many.
Oh, I remember one of them because we were up in the mountains above Santa
Yeah.
Barbara, and you're like, how narrow is this road going to
Yeah.
get? How steep are those cliffs?
That was a fear for me. That was a fear for me, but I still I do it. And then I'm like, because I tell myself, man, on the other side of this, I'll say, I can do this again. Like now I can visit you again and I won't be as nervous. I'm like, let's do it, and there on the other side of that is something really beautiful. I mean, I used to be afraid of flying, and I got invited to give, keynote talks and stuff where I had to fly all of a sudden all the time. And I was like, well, what am I gonna do? Like say no to all the keynote talks because I'm afraid of flying? I got to figure this out.
So how did you do it?
Well, it's interesting. I would say, first of all, they prescribed me a very small dose of anti-anxiety medication, so that was the starting point. But then I took an 8-week mindfulness stress-based reduction, John Kabat-Zinn's 8-week course on mindfulness meditation, and I will say that was quite transformative for me, and I didn't need the medication after that. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And I
So
also
much.
read a book. I read a book. So you asked me how I overcame my flying. I read a book written by a pilot that explained what all the bumps mean at
Oh,
different. I really like to just calm down, and I just
I think
educate
I know that
myself.
because I've heard that argument. It's like a boat on the water bouncing along on the waves. It's not going to crash. It's just that's the turbulence. That's
It's
normal.
just normal, perfectly normal,
Yeah.
and it really calmed me down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so much of your book, it feels like you're creating your own future meaning and purpose and success in the way in which you talk about Richard Wiseman's research on luck, which I always enjoyed, that no one's actually lucky in some cosmic sense
Mhm.
where there's a force adjusting the scales of justice for everybody. But people who self-report as being lucky are also higher in, what was it, openness to experience and agreeableness and extroversion. So they're more likely to go to parties, more likely to talk to people, and then they make connections, they get the job, they meet the person that connects them to their spouse or whatever. And then in hindsight, they look back and go, man, I'm just a lucky person.
Yeah, I love the research on luck. You actually find that people who self-report being more lucky in life, are, I mean, they're so much more open to positive things that are happening, that people who score low in luck, they miss all these things. They're objectively there. They're objectively there for both participants, but they miss it all. They're so focused on the world has wronged me. I'm such an unlucky person. I was born unlucky. Um, it's just not the way. It's not the way forward for your life. Like just like living your whole life being jealous of people who are more successful than you is not the way you're going to be more successful. Like, it's just like there's just certain things, there's certain mentalities that are not going to get you to what you really want to be.
You know why social media, among the many reasons social media is not good, is that it's that comparison is there constantly. If you follow people that
Tell me about it.
are successful,
I see it.
I see it all the time. It's like, some of these guys that I follow, they're like my best friends. And I see, oh, he won this award, or he got invited to give this keynote speech, and I'm so happy for him. And then, like, within a nanosecond, it's like, wait a minute, how come I wasn't invited to give that? How come I didn't win that award? How come my book isn't on the best, whatever?
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in that. So easy.
It's crazy. How many followers does he have on X? Oh, no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so stupid.
It's so stupid. It's so much more peaceful to be off social media.
But okay, so short of just getting off social media and comparing yourself, what do you recommend?
I mean, focus. It sounds trite, but focus on your own value proposition to this universe, and double click, triple click, quadruple click on that. Put out in this world what is unique about you and what you can actually actualize. It doesn't make any sense for you to actualize someone else's self. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And no one can actualize yourself. But I do believe in destiny. I believe in one of my favorite books is The Soul Code by Hillman, a psychologist, arguing, we all have this daimonic within ourselves. It's I get very existential about this stuff, but the daimonic is this kind of guiding force. The Greeks would talk about this kind of guiding force that we all have. But Roll May, the humanistic psychologist, added into the discussion, it's anything that has the power to overtake the whole person. And I think any one of us has a daimonic in us, and it can be used toward very destructive ends. And it can cause a whole life of resentment, anger, and really self-destructiveness, or we can really focus as intently as possible in channeling it towards production, creativity. That's the way, is channeling it. Yeah.
Refocus or reframe.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just focus on what you can do.
Right. All right. Forgiveness. Who is that for if I forgive somebody? Them or me or the relationship? And can you do it without, what if you don't get an apology?
Oh boy. Well, forgiveness in a lot of ways is for you. It's a very stressful thing to walk around with resentments, and after someone's hurt you, it's like they're continually hurting you nonstop because you can't stop thinking about vengeance or thinking about a way of getting back at them. So yeah, there's just a plethora of research in positive psychology showing that forgiveness is correlated with positive well-being in life. But I actually want to just double click on, and I know I'm using that phrase. I'm overusing that phrase right now. Right. I think it'll be the last time I'll use that phrase. But I talk in the book about some people pointing out that there's cheap forgiveness. We don't want to forgive a group who's really truly hurt us, who shows no signs whatsoever of an understanding at what they've done to you. So I think there's cheap forgiveness, and then there's real authentic forgiveness, and it really does take two to tango at a certain point with that sort of thing. But yeah, you really are holding double extra stress when you are carrying this inability to forgive. In fact, those who score high in narcissism, one of the highest indicators of narcissism is their inability to forgive. And I've always found that a really interesting, that really stands out as a marker of narcissism, is that you hold the smallest slights within your system forever. Michael Jordan was actually really good at that.
Yeah, right.
It's personal. It's personal.
Yeah. Yeah. But, so what do you tell somebody that says, I just can't let it go? It's just bugging me. And this guy just so angry about this.
I mean, let it go.
Let it go. Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole,
how do I let it go?
Well, there's a whole
refocus, reframe.
Well, there's a whole model I talk about in my book, which I don't remember right now. There's a whole bunch of steps.
Well, there's the reach method.
Yeah,
recall,
the reach method.
emphasize, altruistic gift, commit, and hold.
I mean, there are some scientifically backed interventions.
Yeah.
You recall the hurt. You offer some gift of forgiveness. You commit to forgiveness. You hold on to it. You meditate on it. I mean, let's just treat forgiveness as not a one moment in time situation, but as a whole process with different stages. And there are some science-backed ways of doing that to move forward with your own life. You want to move forward with your own. Again, you want to, sooner or later, you're gonna have to give up hope for a better past. And sometimes the better decision for moving forward with your life is to let it go.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people that I could hold on to. I will never forgive that person. I will hold on my resentments. And what you start to realize as you get older, I start to realize that I get more Buddhist about it all. Like
you do.
There are some things that are not a good match for me. There are some things that are a natural flow to it. I used to hold all sorts of resentments when, like people would ghost me, or if I was friends with someone and then suddenly they didn't seem like they want to be as friendly, and that would really bother me so much. And then I was like, but do I even really like this person? Like, is this, like, if I'm being honest, is this even really a good fit, this particular friendship, or am I just my ego trying to hold on to this? You start to realize at a certain point, it's a much more peaceful way of living your life to just sort of detach yourself from it personally, and realize that there are just the universe. There are certain things that, and I don't mean to sound woo woo, because I do think there's the causality here, but there's some things that are really meant for you, and there are some things that are not meant for you. And then of course there's a whole other different situation when people hurt you, of course. But I think that even with that, we can be a little bit Buddhist about it.
Nice. All right, let's wrap up at talking a few big cultural, social questions. DEI and sensitivity training programs have been all the rage. And now, Trump said, all right, we're putting an end to that.
Can I just say what a shit show of a topic that one is?
I know. It's unbelievable.
Trump has taken this a bit too far. He's, now I think free speech is a real issue, where he's like, we're going to just deport people we don't agree with, and you just can't be doing that in a democratic society. Just the ones that we agree with can stay. The ones that we don't agree with, gotta go.
Well, yeah, it depends on if it's speech or if it's actual threats of violence
or real
against
hate
Jewish
speech.
students, for example.
That is correct. I agree with that. I agree, but we need to really make these distinctions.
But you've taken these online courses. Everybody's done them. Do they work? Do they make people more tolerant? Or
no, they backfire. I have so many citations. I have like one footnote. Like go see this site. But within that, I have like 100 papers that are all telling a similar story, which is DEI trainings are backfiring, and they're causing lower motivation to reconcile it and to not have bias. If the goal here is to motivate people to be aware of their biases, we're failing. Okay. It's not motivating people to check themselves and quote do better. It's motivating people to to all of a sudden become racist. can we have a little bit of humor about this too? Because
Yeah,
it's such a
absolutely, please.
serious topic, and like,
Yeah.
but like it's causing people to be like, well, I wasn't racist before, but you're so freaking annoying.
Right.
trying to shame me into thinking I'm a bad person because I'm white, like now I'm racist, but look, it's not helpful. It's not helpful, but I think that there is a helpful way of going about it. I think that there is a world of what empowered DEI could look like. I think there's some great approaches to this. Coley Valdary has a really nice approach to what an empowered DEI would look like, as well as use some other examples in the book. One where you come in with the attitude of like, we're here because we want to increase a sense of belonging among everyone in this room. We're not here for shame-based tactics. We're here to increase belonging. I mean, there's a way in which the spirit of DEI could be a really beautiful thing. It's just sadly that's not what became prominent.
Yeah. All right, Scott, I'll end
Yeah.
on a light note here. The last time we were together, you were working on doing some stand-up comedy, and then I saw a video, I don't know, a few months ago, you were doing magic. In fact, weren't you doing a magic show for Sam Harris's family?
Oh, absolutely. I do magic shows for a lot of people. I do magic for Sam.
So is there, there's another side to you. You're like the guy that wants to be a rock star, but instead of a rock star, you want to do something else.
There are many sides of me, Michael. But yes. And wait, say that I want to be a rock star, but what? Say that again.
But that didn't work out. So you tried comedy and now it's magic.
That's funny. That's a funny thing to say. I don't know if I want to be a rock star, but I have so many passions. Like I used to be a professional opera singer, for a certain period in my life. And I love to sink my teeth into things that are challenging, and I like mastering new vistas for sure. Magic is my latest. It's actually mentalism that I'm really into.
Oh, you're doing mentalism.
And I'm a professional mentalist now. Within a year, I became a professional mentalist. I do weddings. I do hotels. It's just like, I'm like, what am I? Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like, what am I doing, Scott? Like I'm a world-renowned psychologist, like, and asking for $100 an hour to do to do mentalism work when I get like so much more doing keynotes or whatever. But I love it. I just love it. I love creating awe and wonder in people's lives.
Did you read Ian Rowland's book, The Full Facts Book of Cold Reading?
I don't think I've read that one. No.
That's a good one. Yeah, no, he's got hundreds of things you could do to, when you cold read somebody, psychically read them. It's mentalism, basically.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Of course, Jamie in Swiss is pretty good at this. Max Maven just died last year. He was really a great. Did you know Max?
I never met him, but he's one of my idols.
Oh, he was so good.
Did you meet him?
Oh, yeah. No, I knew him quite well. Because he was in that whole Skeptic, the Amazing Randy, Penn and Teller, Skeptics movement.
Well, who I am friends with is Banachek.
Yeah, Banachek.
And he was on my podcast.
Quite well.
We talked about his skepticism and his work with Randy. Yeah. So there's still some of those people kicking who are part of that. I love that, and Richard and Wiseman, Professor
Wiseman. He does magic as well. Yeah,
is very interesting. Yeah.
There's something I've noticed interesting about skeptics and magic and all that. There's an interesting link there. Like for example, here's a story I usually tell on this. I'm on this speaker on the Scientific American cruise. So pretty much everybody in our group is a rationalist, skeptic type person. So I got this guy. It's like, I know there's no such thing as spoon bending and psychics and ESP and so on. I'm a skeptic too. But I saw this guy bend this spoon in a way that he could not possibly have done it physically. So as he's telling me what he saw, and Banachek is the one who told me how to do this particular move. We're at dinner, so I take the spoon down beneath here and I do the little move. Yeah. And as he's finishing up, I said, did it look anything like this? And he's like, oh, crap. Really?
I saw your YouTube video on that. I saw your YouTube video.
Right.
Yeah, dispelling the myth.
That's right. Yeah. Well, actually, I thought we took that down. I kind of got yelled at by I think it was Jamie or Banachek said, you're not very good at it. I said, I know.
I saw it a while ago, and
but there's something like there's that Uri Geller or a mentalist is getting things that I can't understand how they do it, right? So I go, okay, when Copperfield makes the Statue of Liberty disappear, Do you actually think he's moving the atom? No, of course. I know that's a trick. Right. So when Uri Geller seems to read your mind and you can't figure out how he does it, couldn't that just be, it's a trick? You just don't know how it's done. It's like, yeah, I guess so. But there's something different about the mentalism thing.
That's right. I had this conversation with Richard Wiseman. There's nothing, I can do card tricks, but my mentalism is what gets the shock, and they feel like it's more personal. Like you're really peering into their head in a way you don't do with card tricks. Right. They don't view it as tricks. Yeah.
They don't view it as tricks. Right. Yeah. It's like, Banachek has this thing where he, pick a card, any card, the force pick. And then he says, now think about the card. And then he does this thing with the hand. Now look at my hand as he's moving it around while you think about the card. And I've heard people say afterwards, I think I was, like tracing out the card number with my eyes. It's like, no, that's not what you were doing. But he does that on purpose to make him think that he's got some, I know it's not psychic, but he can read my body language or something.
One of the highlights of my life is, do you know Jesse Singal?
Yes, I know Jesse. Yeah.
And so they had a party for Bar Pod or whatever in New York. And I came to this party and I was like, I'm gonna do some mentalism on some people here. And I did the stuff I did, Jesse and everyone, they're like, we believe in psychic abilities now. And they talked about this, Katie and Jesse talked about this for a long time at the opening of their podcast. They're like, Scott, what he did, I've never seen anything like it. How is it possible? It was driving them crazy, and this stuff really impacts people at a really deep, profound level. There are people I won't use the word tricks. I'll do mentalism with, hair, people cut my hair, people in restaurants, they remember you years later, they just 5 months later, let's say they're like, I keep the thing on my refrigerator. My psychology doesn't seem to affect people that same way. Yeah. There's something just so beautiful about, I'm so just glad I discovered mentalism. I think it's gonna be a big part of my life moving forward because I can really change people's lives. And it's amazing how I can do that in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The mentalism thing, I guess to people doesn't feel like magic. Doesn't feel like a card trick.
No. And in a lot of ways, it does incorporate psychology. It incorporates cold reading. It incorporates intuition. I bring to bear everything that I've learned about psychology to really, I guess, milk it up. Maybe I don't know if that's the right phrase, but really,
well, and it's and also it's no fun to find out how it's done. I mean, the cold reading book I mentioned, he's got 100 things you could mention in there, and you're bound to get a hit. Maybe 3 out of 10 statements will be true, and the people will remember the hits, forget the misses, all that stuff. But most people don't know those things. You have the number 2 in your address, or you have a scar on your knee, or you once had a white car or a red dress, and you wear your hair shorter now, but you wore it longer when you were younger. Just goes on. And if you just kind of get skilled at bringing those things up in a reading, you can look really good without anybody knowing that. In fact, and the way I learned this before I read Ian's book was I spent a whole afternoon with a guy named James Van Prague, who is a psychic reader, channeler, and so on. And so it was for a histories, was it unsolved mysteries? That's what it was. They rented a house in Pasadena, and I'm just there all day with other people that he's doing reading on all of us. He had no idea who I was. And so I noticed that for the guys, he would he was channeling people from the other side. So everybody in the room, including me, had lost somebody close to them. And I noticed for all the men, he said something about the watch. He's telling me something about the watch, that, and all the guys were like, oh yeah, I have my dad's watch. I have my grandfather's watch, and my dad died and I have his watch. I thought, oh, this is a guy thing. Guys have their dad's or grandfather's watches. And with the women, it was, like a necklace or earrings or, that kind of stuff. And so there were certain things that were true for almost everybody. And if you didn't notice that, if you didn't see it coming up over and over, you would never know.
Right. That's right. If you ask someone draw something, draw anything, you find really it's one of 7 things, And I can go through the 7 things, but I want, like house or, a stick figure. And so if you have 7 outs, but here I am telling secrets I
Oh,
should
no, you don't
stop
have
this.
to do that.
I should stop this. I'm going to be quiet now.
Randy's best. One of the highlights from Randy's life was on Barbara Walters. I think it was, I don't know if it was ABC 2020 or her morning show or whatever. And she had Geller on and had Geller do a reading. I mean, a drawing, just think about it. And, he's like, okay, I think I got it. And of course it's the trick where she goes off somewhere else to make the drawing and then doesn't show it to him, but it's a special pad. So he gets the information. And it was a stick figure. She drew a stick figure and he came pretty close to it. And then, so Randy does it with her, but he the way she set it up, he wasn't able to do what Geller did. So he had a pin and he put it in his belt, right? And then he's holding the pad like this with the belt, with the pin and the belt. And as she's describing it and showing to do it, he's doing the drawing like this. And he shows it to her like that. She's going, oh, come on. And then another one was she said she insisted that Geller bent her car key or house key or whatever it was. And he never touched it. He never touched the key. So, Randy proceeds to do the whole thing where he actually does touch the key. And then, let's see if we can bend it. Now put it back in your hand. Okay, now bend. And of course he'd already bent it when he had it for a few seconds. And she insisted, but Geller never actually touched the key. So they ran the tape backwards because they taped what she did with Geller. And sure enough, he takes, it's like, let's see how it's bending. Now, let me see it for a second. And then he makes his little move and he puts it back in her palm.
That's mentalism 101 is you try with your misdirection. You try to create a situation with like, how are they going to explain this to their friends later on what you did?
Right.
So you want to really play up certain parts and really downplay other parts. You're creating a memory,
right?
An experience in someone's mind. Like it was very elucidating to me to hear Jesse talk about recounting what I had done to him. The way he recounted it was as simple as this. I swear, this is exactly what happened, Katie. Scott asked someone, "What's your favorite movie?" He's never met this person before. I know they don't know each other. And the guy said what his favorite movie is. And then Scott literally pulled out his wallet and pulled out the movie ticket for that movie and handed it to the guy. That's exactly what happened. And it was like really cool for me to like hear, because that's exactly what I wanted the story to be.
Yes. Yes. And there is research on this, that when people recount a magic trick that they see, they make it harder to explain that it could not have been done by trickery. He never touched it thing.
People want to believe in magic.
Yeah, they do. Ray Hyman had a funny story about Uri Geller, because that's how the whole modern skeptic movement started, was when Uri Geller became a big star. And so Ray went to one of his shows or whatever, and let me see, how did this story go? It wasn't working that night. They had somebody who was pretty skeptical and didn't let Uri touch the cutlery or whatever. And Uri was saying something like, okay, it's not working so well tonight, but last night, here's what I did. And he tells a whole story about what he did. And then Ray met somebody later who was in that group with him who said, this is what Geller did. And it's like, no, he told us that's what he did the night before. Right. We didn't see him do that. It's like, oh yeah.
That's right. That's how, you can really kind of get how people's minds tend to work and play with that. Yeah. But I just like the reaction of awe and wonder. I'm not trying to like trickery, like I don't think I get off on the trickery part. I get off on the, well, it's a bad choice of words, but I really enjoy, when someone's like wide-eyed, like, oh wow, magic really does exist. Like we did this for I was out on a date the other day, and I was like, I'm going to impress my date, and so I did this with the waitress, right? A trick, and the waitress was like, oh, you just proved to me that magic does exist, and like I didn't believe it before, but now I know there's magic in the world, and I don't know. It's like, there's something really heartwarming about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't believe there's real magic, but to me, the performances are so good. It is magical. It's like a beautiful concert.
That's what I'm saying.
It's art.
It depends how you define the word magic. I do think there's magic in this world.
Yeah.
But it depends
kind of magic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to go on Penn and Teller's Fool Us and see if you can.
I'm preparing an audition. I met Teller. I went to the big magic convention.
Oh, yeah.
I should write a book about my experience infiltrating the inner world of the the innermost magic secrets. I'm on all the like the secret magic groups on Facebook with Wiseman. We were joking about that on the podcast. Like, I see you in these groups all the time. But um, yeah, I met Teller. I talked to Teller. You know he talks.
Yeah,
He
I
actually
know.
talks. And yeah, I'm preparing an audition, and I'm also preparing an audition for the Magic Castle
Nice.
here in LA, and
Yeah.
also want to put on a stage show, Unlock Your Mind with the Amazing Dr. Scott. My name is the Amazing Dr. Scott.
Oh, that's your
You
okay.
can go to the amazingdrscott.show and book me.
Oh, wow. I had no idea you'd taken it
Yeah,
that far.
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, we used to rent the Magic Castle for a day and take a Skeptics group there. It was always fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Well,
it's great. I've been there in
yeah,
years though.
they're great. Well, maybe if I get accepted, I can take you as my guest.
Oh, please. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places to go. It's big fun.
So much fun. Yeah, it's really cool. Like you've really brushed, you're a legend in your own right, obviously. But I'm saying like I feel like in your career you've been friends with a lot of these legends that are the people that really excite me. So there you
Well,
go.
unfortunately, a lot of them are dying, so that makes me
Yeah.
think. I guess I'm gonna get there at some point myself.
You look good. How old are you now?
I just turned seven. I'm 70 now. I turned 71 in this
That's
September.
incredible.
Yeah.
Does it feel that way?
No, I feel like pretty much like I'm in my 50s.
Yeah, you look
You
in
know,
your 50s. I would say 50s.
Roughly speaking, in terms of like athletic performances, I work out every day and ride my bike
Yeah.
and stuff. It feels pretty much like not like I'm in my 20s or 30s. I can see a huge difference there.
Mm.
Maybe in my 50s, something like that.
50s. Yeah.
It appears that, as far as I could tell, because I read all this stuff and I know these people, that you really can keep it up into your 70s. By the time you're like early to mid 80s, things start to fall apart pretty fast.
Mm.
And there may be no way to do anything about that. Now there's people that, all these tech bro guys that are saying, I'm taking this and I'm doing that and we're going to change all that. Okay.
I have Brian Johnson stuff right here.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I hope it works. I've read all his, Peter Attia's book, Outlive and all those guys. And
Yeah.
okay, maybe. I hope so. Ray
Yeah.
Kurzweil, we're going to make the singularity and then you get to live forever. If you can make it to 2040, he says you'll get to live forever. Well, okay. I'm rooting for him.
Okay. All right. I hope humanity makes it to 2040.
That's right. All right, Scott, that's a good place to end.
But I am positive. Thanks, Michael.